Awesome. Thank you so much, Diane. Hi, Michelle. It's great to see all of you again today. We're excited about being in this space. Sorry for being a little bit tardy. I was trying to stay in the presentation with the candidate as long as I could, and then I ran upstairs and here I am. So the important thing for us to remember while we're working together is for us to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Excuse me, one of the things that we have to do is push each other. And when we're asking each other to look at multiple perspectives, to build relationships, to become vulnerable, because you know that's required, to just trust each other enough to allow ourselves to be uncomfortable, to say things, to take risks. All of us are learning together. And so we really want you to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, as we have when we're working together. Well, she really looks kind of tense, like this is a great depiction of being uncomfortable. And as you know, we've been talking about enabling conditions, and three of the areas that we're highlighting are an asset orientation, looking at an assets-based approach, where, of course, all of us, we want to model this. So while we're working with you, all of us have something to bring to the table. We have knowledge, experiences, a lot of things that we can all learn from. It's important for us to look at, as literacy coaches, look at the teachers you're working with that way, and for the teachers to also consider the students in the same kind of way. Also building positive relationships. And it's interesting, you know, we all talk about caring about each other, the importance of love and building relationships, but we need to build positive relationships. And lastly, culturally relevant, responsive, and sustaining pedagogical approaches. That's what we're going to work on the next time. As you know, last time we looked at an assets-based approach when Diane presented that to you. And today we're going to look at positive relationships and relationship building. And next time, in May, we'll be focusing on number 3, culturally relevant, responsive, and sustaining pedagogical approaches. And I'm excited about this and how things are coming together. We always talk about how when we're discussing, you know, setting things up, things just tend to come together. And the book that you will be reading, that I co-authored, put all of these enabling conditions together in a very interesting way. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you and learning from you as you read some of the excerpts that we'll ask you to read. And so let's get going today.
All right, well, we will dive right into really thinking about relationships. And sometimes when we consider relationships, we think about those relationships that are closest to us, our direct family members, our good friends. But I just want to take a moment and share a quick video about a relationship that only lasted a moment, but the impacts of which lasted much longer. Right, that leads us into our first activity. So thinking about a relationship in your life that's been meaningful or impactful. It could be a large relationship. It could be a small moment in time where a relationship was forged, like what we just saw in this video. But take a moment and reflect not only on what you saw in that video about a relationship, but also one that's impactful for you. So just take a moment. We're going to quick write for about 5 minutes. You can turn off your camera. I'll set a timer and just write down something about a relationship that was impactful to you. We are going to go ahead and transition into breakout rooms where you will have a chance not only to look over your writing, but to really talk in those rooms and to select 3 to 5 words that really capture the essence of what you're thinking. So if you could just take a second before we even go to the breakout to look for those words that capture the essence of what you're thinking, is to go ahead and put those words, those 3 words, into mentimeter.com. And so you're going to go to menti.com and you're going to enter the code that you see. And Diane, maybe you could enter the direct link into the chat if you'd prefer just to click on a link and put those words that really capture the essence of your thinking. Look at those words populating. I love the positive affirmations that I'm seeing there. Please feel free to continue putting in your words. That link will not go away. You can add as you're talking. If you're in a breakout room and someone shares their ideas and you want to steal their word, please feel free. Share that back with us. Take this as many times as you'd like, but we're going to go ahead and go into breakout rooms and really just discuss not only the relationship, but also the impact of that relationship and these words and what it is about these particular pieces that really leave us feeling connected to a relationship. There, I'm going to go ahead and open all of the rooms and you will be able to see this word cloud in your breakout rooms. Choose. Here we go.
All right. Do you want to share the slides? Thank you. So, Dr. McMillon, that was amazing. That's wonderful. I hope you had very good conversations. So we want you to think about now, and you can take a minute to think about it and then share your thoughts in the chat, or feel free to unmute and share. But we'd like you to think about, as you work with the teachers in your buildings, how you might use an activity like this. And so, if you're not familiar, Mentimeter is free. You can do, Michelle just did what she just did with us for free. So anybody can do this. You don't have to have a paid subscription. They do offer paid subscriptions that give you access to more features, but just this basic word cloud activity you can do for free. So take a minute and think about how might you use this, and please unmute or share in the chat. So we're getting some ideas. I wanted to give you a minute of quiet to think. Katie said, I think I would use this exact activity with them, but with the lens of showing up and bringing joy to our students every day, which is wonderful. At the beginning of PD to set the joy for the day. This activity could be used during an SEL lesson on kindness. I'm going to start our next PD with this video. I also like the quick write and then reducing it to 3 words. What a great way to summarize. Dr. McMillon said, I'm going to use it during PD this summer for teachers and tutors in my research project. Chandra said, yes and yes, remembering by impact. It could be shared at a grade level meeting or a PD. Reminder that we need to build each other up, not only our students, but each other. Also could lend itself to a study of character traits. Use this activity to build relationships among staff. Could be used. We definitely all need to bring the joy with us into learning. So there's a lot here reflecting on how we show up, how we focus on joy. And we know from our previous sessions, both with the whole network and in our group, that one way to do that is to start with assets, right? We're going to come back to that yet again today. Julie, thank you. Great time of year to do this activity to get rid of the winter blues, right? So just lifting joy, lifting kindness, lifting relationships is really, really great. Okay, Michelle, do you want to go to the next slide? And Dr. McMillon, and we'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Diane. This was such a beautiful activity. It reminds me of, we were just talking actually, Michelle, Diane, and I, we were preparing for this session. And I don't remember exactly what we were doing at the time, but when it all came together, things just started coming together like this picture. It was a puzzle that began to come together. And I said, not even thinking about it, when we work together, the reward is always greater, because we were complimenting each other on how things had come together. And then they remembered that quote, which, if you think about it, that really touched my heart, because a lot of times we say things and we don't expect anybody necessarily to remember exactly what we said. But just for them to value what I was saying enough to even think about the quote shows the importance of a team effort. Because sometimes, we're just talking, we were sharing ideas or whatever. And when we're talking about building relationships, we want you to feel the same way. Like, we're trying to build relationships with you all. And although we're facilitating this process, we are by no means the only experts in the room. We know that you're the experts as well. And we just believe with our shared vision, all of us together, not just us, but all of us, you as well. When we work together, the reward is always going to be greater. So we really appreciate you participating in that last activity and becoming vulnerable. You know, in the session I was in, one of the people actually started almost crying. And so all of us were tearing up because we just, it was such a passionate, and a moment of vulnerability and trust. And those are two things that we have to have when we think about relationships. So again, remember, when we work together, the reward is always greater. So let's just continue to open up and make ourselves vulnerable and trust each other so that we can build the relationships that we need to do the work that we're doing. Now, I can't remember if this is my slide or not, but I can definitely keep going.
You are welcome to, please.
All right, so we talked about this when we were in Traverse City, how important it is for us to, as literacy coaches and us working together, it's important for us to help teachers connect the research and practice. You are the bridge, literally, that allow them to be able to look at evidence-based research, the research, the practices that researchers like myself are actually implementing in the field, and giving them access to that information and then helping them learn how to implement it. One of the topics, and we're not talking about it today, we will next time, but I just want to throw this out as an example. How many times have you heard the term culturally responsive practices? What does that look like? What does it look like in a classroom? We know it sounds good. We all agree that it's important, but as my mentor would say, so what do you tell teachers to do on Monday morning? And that's what you guys are doing as literacy coaches, building that bridge. And we're really appreciative that you're allowing us in this space to support this process, because that's what we want to be able to do, connect research and practice.
And to that end, you may remember at our last time together back in December, we talked a lot about the importance of compiling resources so that we can utilize those, just like what Dr. Dr. McMillon just said. We want to be able to take those things and be able to use them on Monday, use them the next day. And we're hoping as coaches in this network that some of the resources that we're sharing, or some of the protocols that we're going through, might be useful to you in that way as well. So if you think about our focus on writing, we've already embedded a little bit of writing as a way to really get to the heart of relationships, but also to spark conversation. Sometimes those icebreaker conversations, those connectors, can feel a little off-putting. I'm not ready to share, or I don't have anything to share just yet. And so hopefully by taking that time to reflect and write first, there is something. And then by also having everyone put just words into the word cloud, it gives you a way where if your story might have been a little too personal, instead of focusing just on the words, you could also focus on the words of others. So giving people those different ways into the work. But we also know that it's hard to keep all of that in mind when you go back to your buildings and you're trying to think about your next professional learning that you're facilitating. So we want to create a space, and we have created a space where we can compile these resources. And so I'm going to ask Diane, feel free to put the link into the chat. When we share the slide deck, everything will be in there. If you're already in the pathway, you may have already seen those slides. That's fine. But I just want to make sure that you're able to see what we've put together for you as a first step. So hopefully you are seeing my screen on the site, Relationship Building Resources. And as you can see, we've got some of those resources that we shared at the previous sessions. So things like Dr. Pearson talking about every child needing a champion. We have some videos that are specific for relationship building that could be used at the start of a professional learning, including the one that we shared today. And then we also have resources that have been shared by this network. So if you'll remember the last time we met, there were ideas put out in a form to collect those ideas that all of you had. So those resources are here as well. So thank you to everyone who contributed to that. What we'd like to do is just give you about 2 to 3 minutes for you to just look through what's here. And more importantly than what is here, what is missing? What resource do you know right now that you could share and everybody in this space would be able to use it? So think about those resources. Just some time to do that. Any questions as we go to that? I am seeing the comments, so I'll read a couple of those. So Chandra, I used to use that track video, which makes me cry every single time when I was coaching high school track. It's such a good one. Yes, if you haven't seen that video, it literally makes me cry, and then I have to call my dad and tell him I love him. So if you haven't seen that, that's a good watch. So hopefully these resources, and right now it is heavy on the videos, so I'm seeing that you like the inspirational videos, but we're also looking for new ideas. And so hopefully I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat. This is a link to share additional resources. So maybe you have something right now that you think might be worth sharing. Maybe you've created something that you feel would be a great fit for this resource. But we just want to make sure that you have a way to share with your colleagues so that we can all benefit from those resources that you've found to be really helpful. Any questions before we go on?
Dr.
I have a
McMillon,
quick
you have
question.
two seconds
sorry.
to just talk about this quote, and then I know you have to go.
Absolutely. I was actually getting ready to stand up. I thought I had left the room, but you got me. This is one of my favorite quotes. Please, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Another term that I use is you have to reach them to teach them. And so we all know the importance of love and care. And it's interesting, we were having a conversation about this a little earlier. We have a candidate on campus, as I mentioned. And, it's interesting that people actually agree on this, but they don't necessarily act it out. So what we're looking for is a change internally, a mindset change so that all of us can, begin to implement that care, that love, building relationships from a genuine, authentic perspective. We know we all should respect each other. And some people use the word tolerance, which kind of bug me because that means I'm tolerating you. I don't know, it's something about that term. But people don't care how much you know. They don't want to receive what you have to share until they really know that you care about them. And so I know I feel that way, and it's always been that way for me, even as a child. I didn't perform for teachers that I didn't like. Um, Now Julie is saying, what are you saying, Julie? I see something in the chat. Come on, talk to me. Include quotes like this one. Oh yeah, there we go. We should definitely include quotes for students to respond to. And in fact, for me, affirmations are really important. It's a part of everything that I do with students. I have in my research something called Black Church Pedagogy, and affirmations are really important. We start everything with affirmations. Yeah, so yeah, we need to include that. All right, so I have to run, but I love you guys. I really do. This has been wonderful, and I really look forward to seeing you next time. See you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dr. McMillon. We appreciate you stepping away from your interviews to be with us today, and we will look forward to seeing you in May.
Yes, it's my privilege and pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to another activity. I'm going to share a story with you called An Unforgettable Classroom Exercise. This is a story many of you have probably heard or seen on social media. It's a story that gets circulated around every few years. But every time I see it, I think this is a good reminder and a good resource to use for different situations. So, Michelle, I don't know if you can go out to the link and put it on the screen, but I'm going to read it either way. So I'm just going to read it to you, and then we're going to do a little activity around it. So one day, a teacher asked her students to list the names of the other students in the room on 2 sheets of paper, leaving a space between each name. Then she told them to think of the nicest thing they could say about each of their classmates and write it down. It took the remainder of the class period to finish their assignment, and as the students left the room, each one handed in the papers. That Saturday, the teacher wrote down the names of each student on a separate sheet of paper and listed what everyone else had said about that individual. On Monday, she gave each student his or her list. Before long, the entire class was smiling. "Really?" she heard whispered. "I never knew I meant that to anyone. And I didn't know others liked me so much," were most of the comments. No one ever mentioned those papers in class again. The teacher never found out if they discussed them after class or with their parents, but it didn't matter. The exercise had accomplished its purpose. The students were happy with themselves and one another. That group of students moved on. Several years later, one of the students was killed in Vietnam, and his teacher attended the funeral of that special student. She had never seen a serviceman in a military coffin before. He looked so handsome, so mature. The church was packed with his friends. One by one, those who loved him took a last walk by the coffin. The teacher was the last one to bless the coffin. As she stood there, one of the soldiers who acted as pallbearer came up to her. "Were you Mark's math teacher?" he asked. She nodded, "Yes." Then he said, "Mark talked about you a lot." After the funeral, most of Mark's former classmates went together to a luncheon. Mark's mother and father were also there, wanting to speak with his teacher. "We want to show you something," his father said, taking a wallet out of his pocket. "They found this on Mark when he was killed. We thought you might recognize it." Opening the billfold, he carefully removed 2 worn pieces of notebook paper that had obviously been taped, folded, and refolded many times. The teacher knew without looking that the papers were the ones on which she had listed all the good things each of Mark's classmates had said about him. "Thank you so much for doing that," Mark's mother said. As you can see, Mark treasured it. All of Mark's former classmates started to gather around. Charlie smiled rather sheepishly and said, "I still have my list. It's in the top drawer of my desk at home." Chuck's wife said, "Chuck asked me to put his in our wedding album." "I have mine too," Marilyn said. "It's in my diary." Then Vicky, another classmate, reached into her pocketbook, took out her wallet, and showed her worn and frazzled list to the group. "I carry this with me at all times," Vicky said. Without batting an eyelash, she continued, "I think we all saved our lists." Tears rolled down the eyes of the humble teacher. We encounter so many people in our lives, and it's a precious joy to see the good in all those journeys. So we'd like you to take a minute now, just on your own, to think about the teachers that you work with, or maybe another coach that you work with, and write down the names of 1 to 3 teachers who either you have struggled to establish a relationship with, or with whom you have maybe a challenging relationship. So take a minute and just think about 1 to 3 teachers or coaches and write their names down. Now I'd like you to, next to each name that you wrote down, list at least one asset of that teacher or coach. And if you are fortunate enough to not have any teachers or coaches who you've had trouble establishing a relationship with, or that you have a challenging relationship with, then maybe just think of a teacher or coach you're working with right now who maybe could use a little lift, a little pick-me-up, and write down that person's name and at least one asset of that person. Now, thinking about that person or those people who you listed and their assets, how could you build a relationship or improve upon a relationship with that person or people using the asset or assets as a starting point? And hopefully we're going to have some time at the end of our session today for you to actually write a note to one of the people that you listed today to take the first step in building or improving that relationship. So Michelle, you can go ahead and click ahead. So we do want you to, if we run out of time today, we'll remind you, we'd like you to do that step to write a note to that person. But we're hoping to give you time before we finish today to actually do it. So you'll have it to take with you and give to that person next time you see them.
So I'm
Okay.
wondering, just in the chat or maybe even with the thumbs up, how many of you happen to have somewhere in your life a note that someone has written you that matters? Does anybody else have that, like from a student? Or I'm seeing thumbs up, smiles, yes. I think that that's the power of the written word. Like, I can tell you that there are people who've said nice things to me or things that made me feel good on a given day. But when I'm really feeling bad or wondering about my choices or what I'm doing, does it really matter? It's those written pieces that I go back to, and it's not an email. It's a handwritten note. It's something that matters to me. So just a shout out there for just the written word, but also the power of that, taking the time, that personal touch to actually write something.
And I'm just going to add to that real quickly, Michelle. My first year of teaching, somebody made a suggestion to me to put a folder in my desk drawer labeled pick-me-ups. And anytime I got a positive note or an email from a parent or something from a student, to put it in that folder. And then when I went through those periods of time where the weight of the world seemed to be on my shoulders as a teacher or a coach, I could pull that folder out and remind myself that I had some assets that people appreciated. And so maybe something for you to do for yourself, but also something you can suggest to the coaches and teachers that you support, that they kind of keep that handy, because we know we're not living in a world where people focus on our assets. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves that we have them. Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think it really gets to the heart of this next piece that we're going to give you time to really dive into and read. I happen to be a fan of Jennifer Gonzalez anyway, but one of her recent posts, one of her recent podcasts was on your teachers needing a win. And it really spoke to me on a couple of different levels. One, that I agree, and part of me empathizes with the fact, like, yeah, I need a win. But the bigger part of me really responded to the fact that this is speaking to coaches and people who provide professional learning. So we thought we'd give you about 5 minutes to read. You know what, we'll actually take about 7 minutes if that's okay. I think we're okay on time just for reading. To either click on the link that Diane's going to put on the chat and listen to the first part of the podcast, or to actually take a few minutes and just read through her blog on it. So either way, you're getting the same information, just depending on what you prefer. So with that, if there are no questions, I will go ahead and mute myself. Give you that time.
I thought this picture might give you a little smile. It's sometimes how we all feel, right? So we're going to put you back into breakout rooms, or if you're in a room with a group of people, you're welcome to stay with them and have this discussion. But here are 3 questions for you to think about. And if you have other things that you want to share as it pertains to that story, or the other activities we've done today, you can feel free to do that as well. So how many of your teachers or coaches do you think feel this way, at least some of the time, if not way too often? How does this connect to our focus on asset-based coaching? And what is one thing you can commit to help your teachers experience more wins? So Michelle, I'll let you go ahead and put them in breakout rooms.
Sure.
And we'll give you about, looking at the time, about 5 minutes to have this discussion, and then we'll bring you back together and we'll keep going. Any questions?
I did put those questions in the chat, and we will be whisked away to our room in just one moment.
Also, before you go to your rooms, I think there was somebody who started to ask a question just before Dr. McMillon left, and I think I cut you off. So if you want to put your question in the chat, we'll make sure that we get to that when we come back. And I apologize for that. Michelle, I did add a slide after this one because I think we will have time.
Okay.
So I don't know if you need to stop sharing and then reshare in order for that slide to show up.
Yeah, I refreshed it, so we should be good. I'm just double checking
Okay.
that no one's alone. Yeah, we're good. I'm gonna pause the recording.
Welcome back. So we would love to hear, since we can't be in all the rooms all at the same time, we would love to hear some of your thoughts around particularly how this connects to our focus on based coaching, as well as things that you can commit to help your teachers experience more wins. What were some ideas that were shared in your group? Feel free to unmute or share in the chat.
In our breakout session, we were talking about the kudo cards that we have that we share with the teachers after we've completed a cycle. And this is a picture of one of them. And we have ones that are for all 10 essentials. And then we also have some that are more generic. Like this one says, "Thank you from your literacy coach." And we were sharing that it means a lot to even something like this, it means a lot to the teachers. And the next time we go into their room, we see these maybe on a bulletin board or something, that they're proud of.
That's wonderful. Lisa.
Michelle, you said, I was talking in the chat and it popped up and it disappeared. You wanted to see what?
Are you able?
Oh,
Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, just wondering if you had a digital copy that we could all use. That's such a great idea.
Probably Melissa does. Melissa, we can ask, I'm sure Melissa does, and she can share it with you. Because there's a whole series of them. Like this is another one, and I don't even know if you guys can see these. But this is another one that's generic and it just says, "Thank you from your literacy coach." And then on the back side, it says kudos for, and you just fill out whatever you want. This is for each essential has, this one's essential number 2, read aloud. And then it has on the front, you earned it. So we will check with Melissa because I know, Michelle, that you and Melissa have the contact information.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa. What else? No one else had anything worth sharing in your conversations?
Well, I was in the last group where they shared the postcards, but I will say that I did appreciate the quote in the article that said, "Every teacher is good at something. They need to hear about it." And I just have a specific experience where that is so true. And I just would try to go in and find something small that I could compliment this teacher on every time. And I could just see her confidence growing through that. So that quote just really stuck out to me.
Thank you, Sherry. Anybody else?
Well, I know we already talked about the positive notes, but I think maybe even just those affirmations that they were talking about, I wrote it down somewhere. Start the day with those positive affirmations, maybe just targeting some people that might be struggling or feeling overwhelmed like this, to just send them a positive affirmation, write it down, put it on their door to their classroom, or something like that. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Can I just add too, I think any kind of coaching conversation that you start with is always starting with, teachers have a hard time starting with positive things. So as a coach, just starting with something positive that you noted that happened during the lesson, or even something, an interaction or a conversation between a teacher and a student, helping them see the positive as well. I mean, because every day when we're in classrooms, we see positive things, and just helping teachers even having that positive asset-based mindset as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes even having the conversation and saying to them, you know, what do you think went well? It's really neat to see what they think went well. And then if you can add to that or just confirm what they said, you know, of something positive about the lesson is a great way to start.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you both. I think so often, and I think we're guilty of this ourselves, we fail to recognize what we're really good at. And so when you start with what do you think went well, sometimes we're very surprised at what they say because they're not recognizing some of the awesomeness that happened in that particular lesson or that particular unit. And so being able to lift that for them, I think is really important. Anything else that anybody would like to share from your breakouts? We have about 5 to 7 minutes right now where we want to give you just a little bit of time to either write that note to your teacher or coach that we mentioned earlier, starting with the assets that you listed, or you can continue to explore the resources on the website. We'll put the links back in the chat for you. And or you can add to the shared resources of our group. So we'll go ahead and add those links to the chat, take about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we're going to come back to one last thing before we wrap up the day for you. Okay, this is a poem that Dr. McMillon shared with us, and we're kind of sad that she's not here to share it with you herself, but really speaks to everything that we have been talking about today in terms of building relationships and asset-based coaching. So Michelle, if you want to go to the next slide. And I'm going to read it to you, but you can see it on the slide if you want. The Builder, and this is by an anonymous author. I saw them tearing a building down, a team of men in my hometown. With a heave and a hoe and a yes, yes yell, they swung a beam and a sidewall fell. And I said to the foreman, are these men skilled, like the ones you'd use if you had to build? And he laughed and he said, oh no, indeed. The most common labor is all I need. For I can destroy in a day or two what it takes a builder 10 years to do. So I thought to myself as I went on my way, which one of these roles am I willing to play? Am I one who is tearing down as I carelessly make my way around? Or am I one who builds with care in order to make the world a little better because I was there? So we just wanted to leave you with that thought today that you know, everything we've shared today, from the coffee story to the teacher story to this, to Dr. McMillon's quotes, have really talked about showing up in a way that is being a builder. And sometimes when we get buried in our own, you know, work and our own feeling like we need a win moments, we need to remember that it's hard to sometimes keep track of that. So we thought this was a good way to kind of wrap up our work for today. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Michelle. As always, the network would like you to take a few minutes and reflect on these questions just for your own thinking. These are related to Dr. Muhammad's 5 pursuits and thinking about cultivating genius and joy in our work. So just take a look at these 5 questions and take a couple minutes and think about them. And then we are going to put the link to today's evaluation for the network in the chat for you. And we'd like you to please fill that out before you walk away from your computer or your meeting room today.
I will say too, this is a great opportunity to share in writing some of your feedback with the MAISA team. I can guarantee you that they do read these and really think about them. So when we think about that power of the words that we use, like, this is a great chance to make suggestions, but also to lift up our colleagues.
When you have finished your survey, you can feel free to sign off. Thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing your great thinking, and for sharing your resources and helping us all to do the very best job we can. Have a great rest of your week.